exciting edition of Sports Talk here on Atlantic Television Network. On this edition of the program, Nigeria set plans to host 2020 Commonwealth Games. And coming in from the world of tennis, it is upsets as the top seeds crash out at the Miami Open. In football, Eagles of Nigeria, of course, lose to, the Eagles of Mali. Details of these and many more will be yours when we return from the break.
Telling him not to counterpunch.
Sports Talk here on Atlantic Television Network, and of course, Kingsley Manswell here.
Thank you very much for having me, Sue. Very happy to be here this morning.
Of course, as usual, we'll get started from the local scene, and the Minister of Sports Development here in Nigeria, Senator John Ewan Eno, says Nigeria has the capacity to host the Commonwealth Games come the year 2030.
All right, I think it's actually a very good, initiative, from the sports minister. But taking a look at, things on ground, you don't really expect, of course, Nigeria, to, host that Commonwealth Games at that time. 2030, we know it's still a long time. But, when it has to do with the system of government, down here, with the next, of course, government that will be, in power, as at that time, of course, buy into the idea of hosting the Commonwealth Games. It takes a lot, in hosting the Commonwealth Games, because a lot of money, of course, has to go in. Take a look at the economy of Nigeria right now. It's really stable, and the citizens, of course, really happy, at the moment. And then from 2024 down to 2030, a lot of development, of course, has to be done if will stand a chance, of course, hosting the Commonwealth Games, because a lot of money, of course, needs to be involved in that particular one. Just saw the African Games being hosted by Ghana. A lot of Ghanaians, of course, were not happy because at the moment, since the economy of Ghana is not really stable, they spent about over 200 and something million pounds to host that particular one, and the citizens were like, why didn't you use this money to develop the economy than hosting the African Games at this point in time? It is not the right time, for we to host this particular one. That was, of course, the cry of so many Ghanaians. So for me, 2030 is a very long time. But when you take a look at the situation of the country, as it stands, of course, you don't expect, Nigerians, of course, to buy into that idea of hosting the Commonwealth Games, come 2030. You have to talk about facilities. Do we even have the facilities on ground? At this point in time, so it will really take a lot. So why trying to plan for 2030 using the huge amount of money, of course, to plan for the Commonwealth? Why not try first to put the economy of the country together, so that by then we can, after the economy is stable, then we can look forward to see how we can actually host 1 or 2 Commonwealth Games. Nigeria were bidding to host the 2027, I think 2025 or 2027 African Cup of Nations, which they actually lost to low-rank, countries like, Tanzania, I think Uganda as well. For me, I think we don't have the facilities on ground. So trying to host the Commonwealth Games at this point in time, shouldn't be the plan. First, we should look at the fact of, developing our infrastructure and making sure the economy of the country, of course, is stable. And then we can start thinking about, hosting the championship like the Commonwealth Games.
You're actually talking about the Commonwealth Games. It's just 6 years away. You're talking about a long time. This is 2024, 6 years from now, and you have the Commonwealth Games coming up again. So I think if we are conscious about developing infrastructure, it's not a bad idea. Talking about the Commonwealth Games, no African country since the inception of the Commonwealth Games have been able, or I say, inception of the Commonwealth, has hosted the Commonwealth Games. So I think it's only right for an African country. And what do they say? Nigeria is the giant of Africa, maybe taking the lead on hosting the very first Commonwealth Games here in Africa. And this is aftermath of Nigeria's performances at the 13 African Games that got concluded at the weekend in Ghana. Of course, it's no longer news that Nigeria came second at the Games, just behind Egypt. And talking about Egypt reminds me, Egypt will be hosting the next edition of the African Games in 2027. And so I'm sure that if we are conscious of it, facilities are never fully provided for any competition. Even in Paris, we are still seeing facilities being brought to scratch or to top notch, ready for the games that comes up in just weeks from now. So if we are conscious of developing facilities for the games, if we start now, and then we can maybe catch up in the next 6 years, which is 2030, when the games are expected to be hosted.
Yeah.
Well, but let's still not spend more time on that, because the Commonwealth Games is 6 years away. But aftermath of the 13th African Games hosted by Ghana, ministers asked for a thorough audit and evaluation of the performances of Team Nigeria, aimed at getting set for 2027 to be hosted by Egypt.
Yes, I think that's a very good way to go. Very good gesture, from the sports minister. He's been up and doing. He was, of course, with the athlete team before they went down to Ghana for the All-African Games. He was also giving them, his support as well while they were there in Ghana, participating in different events. So I think audit, of course, has to be done. The performance of the athletes really have to be re-evaluated, for them to see how, of course, they can prepare in earnest for the next African Games, of course, that will be coming up, in Egypt. And for a good one from the sport minister, he has also said that preparation, of course, will commence in earnest, ahead of the next edition of the African Games, of course, in Egypt. And that's what, of course, we need at this point in time. In a situation whereby we take our time to prepare, for the All-African Games, it actually helps our athletes, of course, to perform very well. It makes us to participate, in more sports, at the African Games. In a situation whereby we have about 35, sports down there at the African Games, and then you're only participating in 25, it limits your chances, of course, of getting those gold medals. We're talking about Egypt dominating the African Games. They participated in more sports, of course, than Nigeria. That's why they actually got that edge. So I think 4 years, it takes 4 years for we to prepare for the All-African Game. A preparation will start in earnest, just like the sport minister has said. I think it will go a long way in helping the athletes, of course, to perform well, and also help Nigeria to participate in more sports than what we saw in Ghana.
Nigeria coming second at the African Games, and the evaluation and audit of performances is in top gear now, and we hope that those who are to do the audit and evaluation will do a proper job aimed at ensuring that the Nigerian contingent, or Team Nigeria, maybe comes first at the subsequent game coming up in Egypt. And talking about the African Games, one major highlight of it is that a Nigerian boxer, of course, Patricia Mbata, who is British-Nigerian, actually won gold at the Games in Ghana. But we are getting, she's getting commendation from yet another Nigerian-British boxer, Anthony Joshua, for her efforts at the Games. Kingsley, this is from one Nigerian-British boxer to yet another Nigerian-British boxer.
Yeah, true, and I think it's a very good one. Anthony Joshua and Bata, of course, they were in the same amateur club. So, of course, they knew each other very well. Bata, of course, she's been in boxing for 5 years now, and Joshua and herself, of course, they've actually rubbed shoulders together. They were in the district amateur boxing club, of course, at some point. So they had a very good time with themselves. So, and that's why Joshua is actually, of course, throwing up this accolade, for the performance we saw, at the All-African Games. It's a good one from Bata. We hope, of course, she continued to put herself, of course, on the limelight. Next up for her is the Paris Olympic Games, and we hope, of course, we'll see another impressive performance, this time around. I think for what we saw at the All-African Games when it has to do with boxing, a lot of Nigerian boxers, of course, really live up to expectation. The likes of Adeshina, Joy Ojo as well, but Mbata as well was not left out of the picture. And I think for what we've seen at this point in time, going to the Paris Olympic, we'll really see our boxers living up to expectation, especially the likes of Mbata.
Well, congratulations to Nigerian boxers. They were third in terms of medal haul for Team Nigeria, but first on the medal table in Ghana with 8 gold medals and silver from boxing. I think that's really a very good one for boxing here in Nigeria. Coming first on the medal table, in Accra, Ghana, and of course overall in terms of returns of medals, third for Team Nigeria. Congratulations to 28-year-old Mbata, who has been in boxing for nearly 5 years now, and hopeful that she will secure a passage to the 2024 Paris Olympic Games in just a bit. And talking about the Paris Olympic Games, it is cost what looks like a fortune, 3.2 billion pounds, that's $8, in the effort of trying to host the rest of the world at the Olympic Games coming up in Paris in just a couple of weeks from now. Kingsley, whooping some, you want to say?
Yeah, very, very huge sum of money. It takes, that's what I'm saying.
About almost 3 billion euros.
It takes a lot, to organize, the Olympics game, because it's where you see different countries, of course, come to showcase, themselves, a lot, of course, is actually being put in, to host the Olympics. So, and from what we're seeing at this point in time, it's really going to be very taxful, for France, because the country is already in debt at some point, and they're actually looking forward to get money, of course, to host this one. We hear that taxpayers' money, of course, might probably be increased, in order for them to see how to gather up enough money to actually put this one together. So, hosting the Olympics is always very, very, tough, and huge amounts of money, of course, really have to go, into this one. So for me, we just hope that they are able, to make up the money and see how they can get the best of facilities to have a befitting, Olympic Games.
The Olympic Games is expected to be coming to be in Paris any moment soon, but the cost implications is gargantuan, if you allow me to use that word, because it is nearly 9 billion. At 2017, when this all started, it was about 6.6. Of course, we know the inflationary trends of things now, which is taking it to almost 9.9 billion euros. Well, we wish the French government the best of preparations. The rest of the world are ready and getting geared up to arrive Paris, venue of the Olympic Games. From the Olympic Games preparation and the cost of getting set and hosting the rest of the world, we'll go to golf now. And talking about golf reminds me that the top professional golfers across West Africa have all signed up for the second Custodian Classic, which it is of today at the golf club in Lagos. Ahead of other events in the region, these two is big money. Kingsley, 20 million naira will be there, with the play expected over 54 holes at the end of the games.
Yes, I think it's actually very huge amount of money, and I tell you, these golfers, will be doing all they can to make sure, of course, they get this particular, one as it is. Good one that, we're going to also see some Nigerian golfers as well, in this particular one, the likes of Francis Okpe and some of his colleagues as well.
Francis Okpe, he has actually won 3 events in the PGA Tour and presently leads this season in golf.
And I think it's a good one as well, for Nigeria. I think it's then time we also start looking at golf. Golf has not really, been taken seriously like other sports, of course, I was saying. So I think for the likes of Francis Okpe, and the rest of them, if they can be able to live up to expectation, in this particular one, it will go a long way. Also putting Nigeria when it has to do with, golf down here in Africa. But the huge amount of money, we're talking about 20 million naira, I think is a means of actually motivating these golfers to go all the way to make sure they get this. And we hear this one is going to, comprise of 54 holes, in this one. So I think the golfers will be going all the way to make sure they see how they can get this one.
Well, away from golf, let's look at Formula One. And talking about Formula One, the Australian Open just got concluded at the weekend, and Fernando Alonso is in potential trouble. You want to say, he was fined for dangerous driving and handed a 20-second penalty, which dropped him from 6th place to the 8th at Melbourne, a venue of the Australian Open that just got concluded.
Yes, but of course, this contractor, talking about Aston Martin, they've actually come up to say that they will not appeal, that particular penalty, because it was very dangerous, driving from the man Fernando Alonso. He actually caused, the Mercedes driver, talking about George Russell, to crash, from that particular race. So looking at the way it happened, Aston Martin, of course, they knew that even though they make an appeal, they will not get anything from it. So they have actually let it slide, at this point in time. It was very, very dangerous, driving from Fernando Alonso. But we hope, of course, he will actually get, himself, better in a subsequent race.
Aston Martin, not a very big constructor. You want to say then you do not want to put yourself in further trouble. You rather improve on your position.
Yes, of course. When you know your study, when you know your position, you know your strength, and all of that. There are some certain things you don't do. And taking a look at it, Fernando Alonso, of course, he had a very wrong driving on that particular race, had a very dangerous driving. So that's why they don't even want to make an appeal for it, so that at the end of the day, if it backfires, it might be very dangerous to them. They're not that heavily buoyant to say to fight at this point in time. So I think they're just trying to manage and see what they can be able to get at at the end of the season.
Well, let's stay away from Formula One now. Dangerous driving from the man there, for constructor Aston Martin and Fernando Alonso. But it has been won now. Of course, with the fine dropping of position, I'm very sure that he will learn his lesson. Let's from Formula One go straight to basketball. I'm talking about basketball. One team in the NBA is in cloud 9 as we speak, because Anthony Davis and LeBron James, star players for Los Angeles Lakers, has put in their highest scoring performances in 37 years to hold off the Indiana Pacers. In the match that we saw in the early hours of this morning, LA Lakers beat Pacers by 150 points to 145, with 36 points and of course 16 rebounds coming from Anthony Davis.
Yes, it was really an interesting encounter. But from what we've seen at this point in time, the Lakers, of course, they've been very, very impressive. I think that was the game. That game was actually played a day before today, because we saw at the game early hours of today, the Lakers were in action against the Milwaukee Bucks, and of course, the Lakers actually took in that particular one. They won 128 to 124. It was really an impressive encounter, of course, for the Lakers at this point in time. The Milwaukee Bucks, of course, they tried the most they can, but couldn't get anything out of that particular one. And Giannis Antetokounmpo, of course, coming up with 29 points. Chris Middleton as well, 12 points. And talking about the man down, Lillard got about 21 points in that particular encounter. It was also a very rosy one, in the absence of LeBron James, in that particular encounter against the Milwaukee Bucks early hours of today. We saw Aston Reeve, living up to expectation with 29 points in that particular encounter. D'Angelo Russell, of course, coming up with 29 points as well. So it was really an impressive encounter, back-to-back victory, of course, for the LA Lakers, getting that victory against the Indiana Pacers with a very, very impressive, one for them, and coming up against the Milwaukee Bucks early hours of today. I think we should be looking forward to see the LA Lakers, putting up another impressive performance this season.
Away win for LA Lakers, beating Milwaukee Bucks 128 points to 124 in the early hours of this morning. And Miami Heat had no heat at all, because we saw Golden State Warriors beat them at home by 103 points to 92. Miami Heat couldn't raise up their bar to scoring as many as 100 points in this fixture.
Yeah, I couldn't raise up their bars, to score up to 100 points, and that was not the kind of performance, of course, we expected, from the Miami Heat. Nikola Jovic, of course, was not, in the picture. Just had at 11 points in that particular game. It was even the Nigerian man who actually, had some little bit of performance. Talking about Bam Adebayo, he got 24 points, in that particular encounter. Wasn't a very good performance, of course, from the Heat. But for Golden State Warriors, we saw some impressive performance from the likes of, Steph Curry, who had just 17 points. But Klay Thompson, of course, was the man who really came into that particular game with 28 points in that particular encounter. I think was really a good one, for the Golden State Warriors. They didn't do well in the first, quarter. The Miami Heat took the lead in the first quarter, 26 to 24. In the fourth quarter, but they had a draw, 29 to 29 in the second quarter, and as well we saw the Golden State Warriors taking up the third quarter, 32 to 20, and 28 to 4 to 17 in the fourth quarter, and then going all the way to lead that particular with 113 to 92. Was really an impressive game as well for the Golden State Warriors. Golden
State Warriors are doing well away there in that fixture. 4 matches were seen in the early hours of the morning in the NBA, and all 4 teams playing at home lost. And one of them is the New Orleans Pelicans. The Oklahoma City Thunder beat them by 109 points, 19 points to 112 points. Thunder struck as many times as 119 in the Pelicans.
Yes, of course, was really an impressive game for the Pelicans, and we saw that's an impressive performance. Some of their players, of course, came to the party in that way, especially the likes of Jalen Williams, who got 26 points, in that particular encounter, and we saw just Giddy, of course, with 25 points, and Shell goes on coming up with 24 points in that particular encounter. So they were very much, ready in that particular encounter against New Orleans Pelicans.
96 points coming from Sacramento Kings. Not good enough playing at home, but their visitors, talking about Dallas Mavericks, scored as many as 112 points. 6 points more than the home side, the Kings from Sacramento.
Yeah, it's impressive one, of course, for the Sacramento side, and I think from what we've seen so far, they've also one of the teams that we should be looking forward to getting past Philadelphia 76ers in that particular margin. Of course, you see that they also have what to offer this season. From what we've seen in this point, we saw the likes of Dean Aaron coming up with a total of 23 points in that encounter, and Gideon Murray also with 23 points, and that was as well, a very good, one, for them to get, that particular point, of course, against the Philadelphia 76ers in that particular encounter. For the Philadelphia 76ers, much of their stars didn't really come to the party, apart from Tracy Mazi, who had 29 points in that particular encounter. I think much, of course, was expected from them, but the brilliance of the guys, from the Sacramento Kings was actually much better in that particular encounter.
Well, we have to wrap it up down for the first half of the show. But don't forget that we still have the second half coming. Talking about the second half coming, top seeds have crashed out at the Miami Open, and in football, the Super Eagles of Nigeria and the Eagles of Mali were in action. Who got it at the end of the day? Is it the Super Eagles or the Eagles of Mali? When we return from the break, we'll give you a feel of what happened yesterday at Marrakech, Morocco, where the Super Eagles were in a second international friendly. This is when we return from the break. Stay there with us.
Telling him not to counterpunch. People into the country illegally. That is amazing.
Honorable
You human
on the point of order.
Honorable they are not picking our calls. They made up their minds.
So no agreement with the EU, but
from the line across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring on sport news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economy, sports, and documentaries. So catch all the updates on the happenings around the globe. Stay focused on Atn.
Sports Talk here on Atlantic Television Network, and we're keeping you up to speed with the latest happening around the world of sport. We've told you how this Nigerian government is planning to host the 2030 Commonwealth Games and be the very first in Africa to host the Commonwealth since the inception of the Commonwealth. And beyond that, we looked at some interesting development as well in boxing, where a British Nigerian won gold at the Commonwealth at the African Games for Nigeria, and of course having commendation from, of course, the most known at this point in time, Anthony Joshua, in the process. Meanwhile, let's get to other aspect of the program and talking about the latest from tennis. It is that in the female category at the Miami Open, the biggest name in female tennis has crashed out of the competition. Talking about Iga Swiatek, the world #1 in female tennis. She was beaten by Alexandra Astronokova at the Miami Open. Who would have expected that less known Katrina Astronokova would beat world #1 Iga Swiatek?
No one saw that coming. Of course, I didn't see that coming. She dominated in the two sets. We saw 6-4, 6-2. Of course, it ended in that particular encounter. Poor performance you will see, from a player like Iga Swiatek, one lady who has, of course, been on her toes, for a very long time. Even since this season got started, she's only won, I think, one or two titles, for herself. I think she got the Indian Wells and as well as the Qatar Open as well. And now, from what we've seen at this point in time, for her to be ostracised by Katrina Alexandrova, I didn't really see that coming. So many didn't expect that particular defeat, of course, and for Iga Swiatek. But I think this is one thing one normally see in tennis. Upset, of course, are bound to happen. And of course, Iga Swiatek didn't put up her A game in this particular one, and that's why she was actually being taken off, by Katrina.
1,000 points were at stake, and now she has crashed out before the quarterfinal stage of the Miami Open. Will she still retain her world #1 status? I
think yes. If you take a look at it, she's been able to gather some points, for herself. We'll see the strength of Aryna Sabalenka, who is actually in second position when it has to do with the WTA. If she can possibly get this one, I think she'll also stand that chance of getting closer. But winning this particular one will actually upset, Iga Swiatek, from the #1 position, because she's got about 2,000 points for the last two tournaments. Of course, we've seen for her. Why Aryna, of course, didn't actually get close, apart from winning the Australian Open this year. So for me, I think even though Aryna Sabalenka actually kept this one, which I think it will be a very difficult one, looking at the situation surrounding her in this particular tournament, I think she will not, upset Iga Swiatek on that #1 position.
Iga Swiatek crashing out of the Miami Open courtesy of that defeat by Katrina Alexandrova, and #1 seed ousted by the #14 seed at the Miami Open in the female category. I can tell you, Jessica Pegula did not travel the same way with the world #1 Iga Swiatek, because she was able to navigate Emma Navarro by 2 straight set win there, 7-6, 7-5, 6-3.
Impressive one, of course, for Jessica Pegula. This is kind of performance, of course, so many have been expecting from her. She's one that's she's a kind of player, of course, that we know that will always be on the limelight, but when it matters most, you don't really see her, come to the party. But we normally see this kind of victory for her. We normally see this level of performance from her. But the big question for Jessica Pegula is, can she go all the way, in getting this particular one? That's always, of course, what every tennis lover, of course, always look up to when it has to do with, Jessica Pegula. She's been in the top 5 for the WTA ranking for so many time now, but she has not been able to prove herself, just like we've seen from the likes of Aryna Sabalenka and Iga Swiatek. So I think for me, not just winning this one, but it's going all the way to see how she can actually lift the title at the end of the day.
Well, let's hope that she can get it better. Victoria Azarenka struggled to overpower her opponent at the Miami Open.
Yeah, Victoria Azarenka actually, struggled to overpower her opponent, and from what we've seen at this point in time, it's actually a very huge one. And of course,
Yulia, a Russian, did scare her, because While Victoria took the first set, Lila came back to taking the second set, and she had to struggle, talking about Victoria, to winning the third set.
And we hope that, this, we don't see her, of course, coming up with this level of struggle, because she would have been ousted out, from that particular, encounter. Victoria Sarinka is one name that I've actually been registered in so many persons' mind, and as of now, we don't expect, a player like her, of course, to struggle against Aurelia, in that particular encounter. But we hope, of course, she will be able to bounce back and see how, she can make her game, more, fantastic going forward.
Let's look at what's happening in the male category, and Casper Ruud, to me, looks like one of the biggest names that have crashed out already in this competition. What do you make of Casper Ruud crashing out do I say, is it early to say you crashed out if you are out at just before the quarterfinals?
Of course, very early. Player like Casper Ruud, we should be expecting him, of course, to go...
To relatively unknown player Nicola Jerry beat Casper Ruud in straight sets.
Of course, we should be expecting Casper Ruud at this point in time to go all the way to the quarterfinal, probably to the semi-final. Is it, like I mentioned the other day, these are players that we expect by this time, of course, to start living up to expectation. Casper Ruud, you talk about Hubers, who cares, and the rest of them.
You talked about Hubert Hukes. He was beaten by Gregor Dimitrov as well. Hubert Hukes beaten in he managed to win the first set, but lost out in the last two sets to Gregor Dimitrov. Hubert Hukes, like we mentioned, one player everybody hoped that it was going to be part of the next gen in tennis.
Very, very, very disappointing that we're still seeing this kind of lackadaisical performance, of course, from them. Hubert Hukes, Casper Ruud, and the rest of them. Is very, very disappointing. Take a look at what Gianni Sinner is doing and the likes of Alcaraz. We should be seeing them, of course, at that particular level, competing. Not, coming up today and tomorrow, of course, you're not there. It's really, really disappointing. Not the kind of performance, we the tennis fans, of course, expect from them. We should be looking forward to them, see them, be a top, player when it has to do with the ATP. It was so sad was seeing this kind of disappointing performance from them.
Talking about top player Alcaraz, Carlos Alcaraz, of course, is the defending champion of the Miami Open. Can he do it a second time? He has had to take out his opponent's game Morpheus in straight sets. It looks so easy for him, 6-2, 6-4.
Yeah, I think Alcaraz is one man who is looking very much, formidable this time around. Don't forget, after putting up an impressive performance at the Indian Wells, he's also set, of course, to make up the Sunshine doubles down there in the United States of America. And can he? I think, of course, the future is very bright, for the man when it has to do with this particular competition. With the fact that, yes, we still have the likes of Jannik Sinner and both Daniel Medvedev, it makes it a little bit, difficult for him on the road. But when you take a look at his performance and how efficient and how he has been able, of course, to put himself, his level of confidence back, you definitely give it up to, Carlos Alcaraz in this particular one. And looking at the fact that he has a target of making the Sunshine doubles in the United States of America at this time, I think that is actually be a very huge motivation for him in going all the way to see how he can lay his hand on the Miami Open. No
game Morpheus, no Casper Ruud, but we'll still have Daniel Medvedev in the mix. We'll still have defending champions, of course. We told you about Carlos Alcaraz still in the mix in the male category. Then, of course, Jannik Sinner, the man from Italy, is still there as well. So interesting days ahead at the Miami Open. Can Carlos Alcaraz do it the double after winning what they call the Sunshine double? Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed. He did it at the Indian Wells. He hoped to do it as well at the Miami Open. The sun is up out there for the young man from 21-year-old from Spain. Let's go to football now and talk about football. Today at the Dokia Messi Mecca Stadium, Rivers Angels will be in action against their counterparts from Delta State, and this promises to be a clash of titans.
It should be a must win for Rivers Angels because their last game they lost, in a very, very ugly way. They were beaten by Edo Queens last time in their last encounter, 4-0.
4-1?
4-1. That was a very embarrassing defeat, of course, a team like Rivers Angels. But we hope they'll be able to redeem themselves against Delta Queens, which will be a very tall mountain to climb, even though they will be playing at home at their Doke, at Messi Mecca Stadium. So we hope that, the coach of the site, White Ogbonna, who has been talking to us ahead of the encounter as well, will live up to his petition, of course, with the tactics with the girls.
Well, we hope that the Rivers Angels will understand that there's a double defeat will not be too good for them, especially on their position on the table. And We wish them the very best of luck today at their Dokia Mercy Mecca Stadium, where Rivers Angels will be up against Delta Queens in another clash that will be top of the bill in female football. There should be action tomorrow as well at the Samuel Bovo Stadium in Benin City, Kingsley.
Yeah, there should be action, and of course, we look forward to see
Edo Queens in action as well.
Yeah, Edo Queens, of course, looking forward to get another impressive victory against Sunshine Queens.
I think that match should be today, later today.
Yeah, today. The games, of course, are today, and we'll see how far they'll be able to. Edo Queens, they've been very, very impressive, this season, and I think they're also one of the teams that will be contending strongly as well, for the title, and that's what teams like Delta Queens, Rivers Angels, of course, should really live up to expectation, because from what we're seeing, the level of performance from Edo Queens this season, I think they've been very, very impressive. We need a team this time around in the Nigerian Women Football League that can go all the way down to the continental level and also put up, a very good challenge. But let's see how far Edo Queens, of course, will be able to go with their performance this season.
Well, talking about performances this season, one man that is in the Cloud 9 as we speak is Baba Ganaru for Aqua United. He's gotten 4 points out of the available 6 in the last 2 games, and he's returned to you now. It looks like everybody is happy with him. Baba Ganaru, Aqua United winning away, jumping up from relegation zone as we speak.
Yeah, impressive one, of course, and it's good of a thing that Aqua United are having a man like him, talking about Mohamed Baba Ganaru. He's an experienced manager in the Nigerian Premier Football League, won at the MPFL.
What with Canopilas?
Yes, and he's also had a very good time as well with the likes of Nasra United, Wiki Toys, Lobby Stars, even the relegated Economy Warriors that are actually struggling now in the NNL. So for me, I think the man has much of the experience. Aqua United, they've been struggling since the resignation of Coach Fatah Shaw. They've not gotten a manager. They've been working with the interim manager, the assistant manager, and now Baba Ganaru coming in. I think it will help them. We saw a very impressive performance down there against Plateau United over the weekend, where they got an impressive away victory, 2-1, despite, of course, the mammoth crowd, that came down there. Aqua United were still able to put up that level of performance. So for me, I think we'll start.
But wants to be out of the struggle area is Doma United. They too have had to contract Coach Bala to assisting them navigate the rest of the season.
Yeah, impressive one. And let's see what Bala Mohammed, of course, will be able to do. I think he just resigned, from Katsina United due to, much threats, from the management and from the fans due to the fact that, they were not getting the necessary result, and he actually complained on the fact that the management, of course, are not meeting his demand, and they're expecting more from him. He has to, of course, step down, from the team, and coming down to Doma United, I think it might be another new start, of course, for him. Let's see how far they'll be able to go with this Doma United side.
Doma United with a new coach, and we hope that they will be able to get out of it. Pantami Stadium, their fortress, suddenly turned to where they lose games as well. Let's quickly go a little bit continental now. Rivers United are expected to be at the Godswill Akpabio Stadium on Sunday against defending champion, yes, USF Alger of Algeria, in the first leg of the quarterfinal clash at the CAF Confederations Cup. And we understand that match now has had a change of kickoff time. The match will no longer kick off at 4 p.m. Nigerian time. It will kick off at 2 p.m. Nigerian time. Kingsley, a lot of people say the Algerians will have to suffer heat. Do you think this is a good strategy, changing the kickoff time from, is it 5 p.m. to
2 p.m.
to 2 p.m. Nigerian time, just to take some pounds of sweat from the Algerians?
Suffer heat, for me, I don't think that might probably be, a problem for the North Africans. The North African is a little bit hot at some points here, and we understand that sometimes it's always very cold. But I don't think that will be a problem for them, getting into this particular one. Don't forget that the defending champion of this particular one. So they don't have much worries. When it has to do with level of experience, they have it. Rivers United, I think they should be wary, because last time this was where they actually crashed out of the competition against Yanga. So this time around, no matter the strategy, I think what should be the key thing is making sure they get all 3 points and score very huge number of goals, because getting down to the North Africans to play, it is always it will be very, very difficult, for them to get, the needed results, down there. So changing time, I don't think that will actually, maybe bring down the strength, of the Algerians. They have what it takes. They have the experience. No matter how you want to twist it, they are up to the task. So for me, Rivers United should be very, very ready.
Less than 3 goals, and Rivers United may not be in a strong contention in the second leg fixture in Algiers, and so Rivers United definitely have to score at least 3 unreplied goals in Uyo. Whether they do it under the heat or under the sun, you will know. But now it has been confirmed that 2 p.m. is the kickoff time of the encounter on Sunday at the Godswill Akpabio Stadium, Uyo, between Rivers United and their Algerian counterparts, USM Banga of Algeria. And talking about Nigeria reminds me of the international friendly that took place yesterday in Marrakesh, Morocco. The Eagles of Mali beat the Super Eagles of Nigeria by 2 unreplied goals. It looks like, do I say, the optimism from Finidi George had some kind of a crash yesterday. He won the first game against the Black Stars of Ghana, and everybody was in a euphoric situation. And now he crashed so badly in the second game. 2 unreplied goals. He didn't score on the night.
It was a very disappointing performance, Mr. Siri, from the Super Eagles of Nigeria. We saw a very poor defense. It's been a long time we saw that level of poor defense, for the Super Eagles of Nigeria. Frank Onyeka not in that game, Calvin Bassey as well, and Victor Osimhen, Boniface, and the rest of them. William Chusekon, of course, not in the defense, which we know that he's always the man motivating them down there. But for me, I think that was not really an excuse to a Malian side that you're well ranked and that didn't even get to, the quarterfinals of the African Cup of Nations in Africa. So for what we saw yesterday was really disappointing performance, and at this point in time, a lot of Nigerians, of course, do not have that trust or hope of Finidi George, of course, leading the team at the moment. This
is an international friendly. They're looking out for several factors. Maybe the results do not matter, and so it should not count against Finidi George as well.
Maybe it does not matter, but of course, you understand how Nigerians, of course, they react. From what we've seen, at this point in time, yes, a little bit of a performance than in the game against Ghana than what we've seen from Pesero. More of an attacking-minded side, talking about the Super Eagles of Nigeria under Finidi George. But in this game against, the Malians, we saw them playing more in the back, distributing the passes in the back and trying to see how they can get, on the counter and all of that. But within the players, of course, didn't actually put, those passes correctly, and we saw them, of course, not. The Malians even had a little bit of possession, in that encounter than the Super Eagles of Nigeria. We had good players stand there. Victor, we have, what's it called? Moses Simon was there. We have Alex Iwobi as well in the midfield. We have the likes of Simi Ajayi as well. We have top players in that particular encounter that would have actually buried that game against the Malians. But I tell you, that performance was nothing to write home about. And there's no how you tell me that Finidi, of course, is not also involved in that particular defeat, of course, we saw.
It was a night of international friendlies at the Wembley Stadium. It was England 2 and